All right, it's time for another Wild Card Watch update. What's going on in the Western Conference Wild Card race, plus goaltender interference and expanding hockey in Utah, all coming your way in the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast.
You are Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. I'm veteran NHL voice Tom Callahan, joined by longtime team analyst Robin Leaño. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every single day when it comes to the Utah Hockey Club. We've got a Wild Card Watch update on the way here for you, and we're going to get into, well, we're not going to explain goaltender interference because no one can, but we're going to try to... Yeah, we're going to dance around it a little bit and see if we can come up with some sort of understanding. And then an interesting topic of conversation for the expansion of hockey and indeed all ice sports in and around Utah. So, Robin, we got to start with the watch, though, because can anyone slow down the St. Louis Blues? They are absolutely on fire right now.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier this week, and I'll say it again. The St. Louis Blues have definitely been the hottest team since the Four Nations break, coming back from the Four Nations break, I should say. And it seems like there's no slowing them down. They kind of look like they were, they were a bubble team beforehand, but now just unstoppable. You mentioned it before going on the air, Tom, but it looks like the St. Louis Blues very well could even catch up and surpass the Minnesota Wild.
The Wild are just kind of skidding along at 500 right now. The Blues have won 7 in a row. They're just they're on fire at the right time. They've worked themselves not only into 8th, but as we mentioned, Robin, they're 2 points out of 7th. So as we throw the graphic up here for those of you watching on the YouTube side, although Minnesota has a game in hand, St. Louis is knocking on the door. And the Wild have the edge in the right places. And the regulation wins in the row column. They're 40, 27, and 5. St. Louis 38, 28, and 7. But I mean, they're getting hot at the right time. It'll be interesting to see how far they can go, to be honest with you, Robin. But as we look below the cut line, trying to keep pace with St. Louis right now, it's a 4-point gap to Calgary, although they have 3 games in hand on St. Louis and therefore 2 on Minnesota. Vancouver did get back in the win column, but they've slid back to 78 points. And of course, Utah, which, I mean, again, that's a crushing 5-1 loss to Detroit. Utah is now 8 points out of that final wild card spot, and they have 11 games to play. It's not impossible, Robin, but boy, that's a tall order when you have to leapfrog 3 teams and make up an 11-point deficit in such a short period of time.
Yeah, if you take a look at of all the possible scenarios of how this can go down, it's literally coming down to like a very, very small amount of things that could happen. That need to happen in the right order for Utah Hockey Club to have a chance to get back in this fight. And again, you said they're not completely out. They still mathematically have a chance. Things could go completely right for them. Utah can go on a tear, and Calgary, Vancouver, and St. Louis can just stall. But that's what you're asking for.
Well, I think Vancouver is going to stall, and Nostradamus has already predicted that. I think Vancouver is going to stall and fall out away from the race here now. This is not an easy week for Calgary, although they did beat Seattle 4-3 in overtime, but now they have Dallas and Edmonton. Those are no easy wins, especially when they're at Edmonton, and the Battle of Alberta is always fierce. If you are new, by the way, to hockey, games between Calgary and Edmonton, because they are regional rivals in the province of Alberta, there's a reason they call it the Battle of Alberta. One team can be 10-1, the other one 1-10, and you would not know it when they take the ice. It is intense to watch those games.
I will say this, Tom, about those. Like I've always loved those regional rivalries, especially when there is a level of pride between, like, in this case, it's like Northern versus Southern Alberta, and I can say that especially. I'm pretty sure you have a lot of stories too of regional rivalries, Tom. But I can say it for me as a kid from Northern California, the Bay Area versus the Los Angeles rivalries, for example. No matter which way you wanted to, put it, which you wanted to do the, Giants, Dodgers, or Sharks versus Kings, or 49ers versus Rams, or 49ers versus Raiders for a certain small period of time. Like those were intense every single time. And it shows in the Battle of Alberta. It really gets into it. And those are my favorite. I think one of my all-time favorites, Tom. I think it was when it was we had a line brawl that ended towards the end of it was a goalie fight.
Those are always fun. I mean, you don't see them that often, but when they happen, they're always fun. So those are, I mean, I love a good goalie fight. Who doesn't? Probably the goalies. Some goalies love it though. Some guys look for that stuff.
Oh, I'm sure in this one, who was it in these games? Was it? God, I'm trying to remember who were the goalies involved.
How long ago are we talking? I can take a guess.
This is just 3-4 years ago. Fairly recent.
Interesting. So Quick would have still been with the Kings. It was against Kings, right? Sharks Kings. Is that what
no. This is I'm going back to Battle of Alberta here.
Well, then it would have been Markstrom for Calgary a couple of years ago, likely, or Vladar. And then for Edmonton, could have been a lot of people. Could have been Campbell, could have been Skinner.
Right. I got it. It was happening in 2020, and it was between Cam Talbot and Mike Smith.
Wow, Mike Smith was still playing in 2020?
Yeah.
Holy cow, throwback for the Arizona fans. Wow. Mike Smith. Jeez, I didn't realize he made it into this decade. Good on him. I do remember that. That's crazy. But, I mean, yeah, the regional rivals are always a lot of fun. But, again, that doesn't mean it's a foregone conclusion. And Vancouver's on that killer trip right now, which is why I think they're going to fall out. But look at what St. Louis has coming up. They just beat Montreal 6-1, and now they've got Nashville. And I don't want to say look past Nashville, but look past Nashville, and you got Colorado. Colorado might actually turn out to be a pretty darn good test for where the Blues actually are right now to see if that is who could slow them down at the end of the week. But by then, they could have won 8 in a row. And I don't know, St. Louis and their schedule is easy down the stretch. The Blues just have a weak strength of schedule. I think coming out of Four Nations, they had the weakest strength of schedule. So
that's certainly what made it easier for them.
Yeah, I mean, it sets up well. Well, you got to take care of business, right? And they have been. So soon enough, Robin, we're going to have to add Minnesota onto our schedule card here. I didn't think we'd actually have to do that, but they just kind of continue to fall back to the pack a little bit here.
It would be so interesting to see if Minnesota falls out and one of the 3 teams below this line takes their spot. Like, even more things have to happen, but it certainly can happen.
I think that would be an unmitigated disaster. Honestly, if Minnesota fell out, that would be the biggest possible disaster for the Wild, especially heading into this offseason. And look, this was a season they didn't think they'd be where they are. So at the end of the day, if they miss, yes, that might have been the expectations. But when you've been in it all season and you even flirted with the division lead at one point, now I think we can't classify missing the playoffs as anything but abject failure for the Minnesota Wild. So you think the pressure's on in other cities?
If the Wild do miss the playoffs, if you're their GM, do you just blow it up?
Well, I don't think
panic like that. No, you don't.
Well,
okay.
Well, here's the reason why is this is the last year for those contracts finally coming off the books for them. Those giant buyouts. So they're finally shedding those
Suter and
Parise. Those are finally going to disappear. And that's why this year is such a total surprise. But I mean, if they get through it, good for them. But this is, I don't know. I think Minnesota wasn't supposed to be here, much like, St. Louis, I think, is a little bit of a shock right now. But I don't know. We'll see. Nashville was supposed to be here, and look how that turned out.
Right? Yeah, I know. Sometimes things just. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. As much as I love this sport, hockey's dumb.
It certainly can be. It certainly can be. Robin, if I asked you to define goaltender interference, after you hemmed and hawed for a while, or any NHL fan, or any NHL GM, or any NHL coach, or any pundit, you'd get 100 different answers from 100 different people. So we're going to try to iron some things out because Gary Bettman tried to iron some things out. So stick around because, well, we're gonna try. And tonight's show is brought to you in part by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? It's easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Our organization's been in a spot where we just had somebody leave during the season, and you need to find somebody pretty much yesterday. Every day you're losing time, the pressure's on, and you're getting set back without the right person. And so that's when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy because they make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. So now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. Back here in the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. Subscribe, will you, if you're still here and you haven't already? Thank you to those of you that do. And for folks jumping on brand new on board, we appreciate you being here. The numbers are growing every day. Tell your friends about the show. Have them check it out. And we'll all just build a big old hockey community that's friendly and inclusive. And we love talking about things and just having a good time with the Utah Hockey Club chatter. So we appreciate you being here. Also, if you're on the YouTube side, give us a thumbs up. Helps with the algorithm, helps you find more great content, and helps us get in front of more Utah Hockey Club fans. So thank you so much for that. So, riddle me this. I'm going to put on my Batman cape for a moment. What is goaltender interference, Robin? So the NHL, out of the NHL GM's meetings last week, said that after the coach's challenge for goaltender interference was initially instituted 10 years ago, there were upwards of 200 per year. So the league goes and presents this data to the 32 GMs, and then they showed it to the media. But only 105 calls pertaining to goalie interference have been challenged so far this year. So the numbers are cut in half. And it's more than there were last year, and the most since 2019. 60 have been overturned, 48 were overturned then, because if you're wrong, you get a minor penalty. So even Kay Whitmore, though, he represents the goalies. He's a former goaltender, played for the Whalers and a few other places back in the day. And he's in on the Situation Room for the rules challenges. And he says the reason why he thinks the numbers have significantly decreased over time, but the percentage of successful challenges has risen, is because coaches have a better understanding of how the rules applied. So knowing that Rule 69.5, which Whitmore called a convoluted rule to begin with, no kidding, the NHL's trying to explain this to teams. And Robin, I think that is the problem, is it a player incidentally or purposefully making contact with the goaltender? How do you figure that out? Is that contact sufficient enough to impede the goaltender from playing his position? And then where is the contact with the goaltender made? And does the goaltender have enough time to reset after the contact is made? All of these things go into it. And it's getting people to agree on that. Any of that seems impossible. How do we do this with goaltender interference?
I don't think there is any way. Like, it's hard to give any correct answer, Tom, because again, as you said, it's like there's a lot of subjective moving pieces to this. But there is at least, I mean, and I think in the bare bones, I think what people can tend to understand is, I think, is that it is the level of what kind of contact, what kind of contact we're talking about, and whether or not it actually impeded the goalie's chance on making a save or make on a shot. But that's as basic as you can get, right? But that's what brings up to so many different interpretations. And then there's all of a sudden it's like, oh, you take a look at 2 strides or 3 strides beforehand, you can see a defenseman kind of pushed him a little bit. So where does that go in? Or you can see the goalie played a little bit out, so they were outside of their crease, the little blue crease. How does that affect the chain, the decision making? So I feel like there has to be something set like completely where it is pretty much black and white. Because I think right now there's so much gray. I think each ref has a different interpretation on their own.
To me, I think goaltender interference is pretty simple. If the goaltender cannot make an attempt at making a save, that's goaltender interference. To me, and I know that again it's subjective. I don't think where the contact happens should necessarily be a consideration, because if the goaltender's out on his angle and he's out up top of the paint, for years, and even I was taught as a goaltender learning to play, the crease is your protected area. Once you're outside of the crease, you're fair game. Well, the problem with that is sometimes playing your position requires you to travel beyond that limit. It's not like you're tethered to the crease and then you get an electric shock if you
Got to
leave.
cut down the angle.
Right. You got to get out there. So, and sometimes you're going after pucks, but so that's where the gray area comes in is, okay, was the goalie impeded? But even with the way the rule's written, if the goaltender can get back up in time and set up and then still misses the puck, then the goaltender recovered his position. That should have been a goal. I would argue that it changes the entire setup of trying to make that save, especially because I guarantee you in the time from when you got knocked down to when you get back up, that puck has moved, so I don't know. That's just me. If it impedes a goaltender's ability to make a save, that's what I go with. But at this point, I mean, it's a review process that takes account all the angles. And even Colin Campbell said, we know because it's a coach's challenge, when the decision's rendered, someone's going to be mad, right? One bench or the other is going to be mad. One bench is going to be like, they got it right. And the other bench is going to be like, you guys are idiots. So I just don't think you're ever going to please everybody on this. It's so hard to set a standard. And I understand why it's confusing for fans. And that's why we're talking about it right now.
What's even more complicated, Tom, and this could probably be explained better in some cases too, depending on who you're talking to. But also the difference between getting a penalty for goaltender interference versus a goaltender interference just flat out just taking away a goal.
Right. And if you miss a challenge, then you get a penalty going the other way. So there are consequences. No matter what, there are consequences. So, if goaltender interference is still confusing to you, hit us up in the comments or hit us up on social media. Let us know. Or if you think you have the answer to Rule 69.5 and how we can make that easier or not make it easier. Because, I mean, if you've got it figured out, good for you. I certainly do not. So, we'll try. We will try. So, we will continue on. You know what we're going to do, Robin? You and I, we're going to hatch a plan to expand ice surfaces in Utah. What do you think? We'll do that right now. All right. Well, let's work on that. Let's make that happen right after this.
And today's episode is brought to you by Trade Coffee. If you're like me, your mornings will have to start with a good cup of coffee. But I got tired of selling for grocery store brands that just weren't cutting it. I'm very picky with my coffee, and that's why I turned to Trade. Now, let me tell you, this coffee is next level. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the U.S., bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. The experts have taste tested thousands of coffee, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee, know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. And let me tell you, I took their quiz. It kind of was able to match me with a type of coffee that really worked for me. I mean, I kind of already knew what kind of coffee I liked, so I kind of wanted to see how close is it to my taste in coffee, and they definitely got it right. They liked that I liked the more medium, the lighter on the side in the blends. That I prefer single origin. And you know what they sent me after I got it? They got me this right here. And it not only does this smell amazing, I just love the smell of coffee, but this coffee right here that they sent me, it absolutely tastes amazing, and it works back good in my favor. This one specifically says it gives me notes of blueberry jam, rosé wine. It's juicy and sweet. Plus, it is that light kind of roast coffee that I personally love. Trade definitely hit it, right out of the park with this one for me on my first go ahead, which to me absolutely did surprise me. But I, in a great way, absolutely loved it. And right now, Trade is offering our listeners exclusively 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. That's drinktrade. That's TRADE.com/lockedonnhl for 40% off your first order. Once again, drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl.
All right, Tom Callahan, Robin Leaño back here with you in the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast as we're getting set to wrap this show up, but not before talking about, Robin, you happened to spy over on the tweeters an interesting dialogue, let's say, between Ryan Smith and a Utah fan.
Absolutely. And I try to follow as much as I can to see what's going on in the Utah hockeyverse. And a hockey fan who is a parent, I will give that preference here, who is a parent, tweeted at Ryan Smith and said, "Hey, Ryan, is there any plans to help the state build more hockey rinks in the states where they live?" They said that their Ogden was full. That the other whatever the closest rink to them outside of that was also closed. That they couldn't find a rink, and their kids were super bummed about it. And I guess rightfully so. I mean, I would probably feel super bummed if we traveled halfway, halfway across the valley to not find any ice time. So this is what Ryan Smith, he sees it, actually responds to this guy in a quote tweet. So for everybody to see. Almost like I think 1 million views at this point for this, 1 million engagements on this tweet, by the way. And it says, "This is going to be a summer project." It said, "We believe that every municipality in Utah should have an ice rink. Utah is the youngest demographics in the USA and is the fastest growing state." Give us an example. With basketball, we have 70,000 kids playing junior jazz and more basketball courts per capita than anywhere else. Should be the same for hockey. More to come.
Interesting. So I will say this, and I will compliment the Coyotes. When they were in Arizona, I think, Robin, they did a great job of making sure that they were growing the game by building rinks. I think Dallas has done a commendable job of expanding the number of sheets.
And it goes beyond that. I think it goes beyond building rinks, Tom. And it's huge. It's a huge bit, right? Because the more rinks you have, the better it is to be able to find, to kind of help your next steps, right? Be able to get out there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I will say this, and you know this, Tom, because we both spent time in Tucson. Is outside of the Tucson arena, there was no rink. So right. Where did the Wildcats have to go before the Tucson arena ice was installed? He had to go all the way up to Chandler or Gilbert.
That's right.
That's for those that aren't from Arizona and are Utahns and don't understand Arizona geography, that's a 2-hour drive.
Yes, it is. And that is not an easy drive. It's not, especially, I mean, it's one way, by the way. Should we mention that? We're talking 2 hours one way. So, yeah. I mean, it's not short. Plus, Phoenix traffic can be a nightmare.
Mhm.
I mean, traffic in any city can be a nightmare, but that if you want to expand the game, if you want to grow the youth, and look, the fans who are kids, and Robin, I've been around the game long enough to actually see this generational flip, and let me tell you, sometimes it makes me feel old. But generally, it takes 15 to 20 years for the kids, and I'm talking like late single digits, early double digits in age, to then grow up, start a family of their own, or get a job that can pay for some sort of ticket package or some single game seats and come back on their own. And then when they do have a family and they do have kids, it starts all over again.
Mhm.
And I've seen the process unfold in a ton of different places. Part of the way that you get kids hooked on the game is not only to get them to enjoy the game live and to meet players and see mascots and have appearances in the schools, but to get them out there. And the NHL has a great learn to play program where the gear is free. It is limited signups, but that's a great program. And if you have more sheets of ice that you can do those things and teach kids how to skate and how to play hockey, and it's not just hockey.
Mhm.
It could be figure skating or just even free and open public skates, just a place to go and something to do. And
Curling,
it
maybe?
engenders interest. Curling would be great. Let's go curling.
Go curling.
I'll go curling.
Absolutely.
I want to
But
try
yeah, no,
that so bad.
absolutely. You want to be able to want to be able to have the more rinks there are, the more ice is available. So that allows more kids to play, more people to play in general, because that's also not forget adult hockey is a thing. You want to be able to grow hockey in that aspect too. And I can say, as someone, you mentioned Arizona, right, as an example, saying that you thought that they did it pretty well. I mean, I wouldn't be playing hockey if it weren't for the Coyotes and putting their grant for Pride Growlers that ended up finding me a spot in the league with the LGBT hockey league in Arizona. Um, I only started playing 3 years ago. So I mean, that gives you an example there, which also made me think about something, Tom, when it comes to being able to grow the sport. And this is important to me. And one of our fans responded to a my quote tweet, or at least the show's quote tweet about it. Essentially, the eyes wide open, saying like, just like, ooh, look, like they keep our eyes on this for what Ryan Smith's tweet. And I got a response saying, growth of hockey is vastly important. But how do you grow and make it accessible to all when the cost is too high for low-income families and single parent households? More focus should be on affordable gear, lower team dues, and less travel.
That is where, first of all, NHL Learn to Play comes in, because when your child is signed up for the program, the gear is free.
Mm-hmm.
So that's huge.
That's that, which is good. That's step one. But I do get, I understand what they're saying here, right? Because it
Travel
does get
hockey is
expensive.
expensive.
Yeah, travel is certainly expensive. No matter what, it's going to be expensive. Even if it is you want to play in a little house competitive league or whatever it is, those dues are expensive because ice time is expensive. But
Right.
what will happen, Tom, and I think we'll kind of see, is ice time cost will go down when there is more ice, because there's limited
Right.
ice. There's the demand. Everyone knows basic economics, right? I'm not trying to teach you anything crazy. Limited ice, higher demand,
Right.
higher price.
Yep. And if you have more sheets, more rinks, more places to skate, and you can expand those
Yeah,
programs, absolutely, you get
but
more kids into it.
we'll also see too over time, as the sport continues to grow, and this is we'll see maybe even like nonprofits, kind of start up and say and have gear drives that kind of will kind of help, because maybe there's a kid who started earlier and then all of a sudden they grow out of their gear or whatever, they need new gear. These kind of programs will help them getting those upgraded gears, and again, it's still hand-me-downs, but at least it's getting them back in the right size. Or maybe grants and scholarships to allow kids from lower income families to be able to pay these dues and be able to play the sport.
Right.
Because to me, I think that's huge, because it is gear and ice time is what does deter a lot of lower income families from playing this sport, which isn't, as I could say, it's something that I wouldn't be firsthand if it weren't for those kind of resources.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, I learned to skate even growing up in Buffalo and specifically the city of Lackawanna. I registered for a free learn to play hockey, learned to skate, learned to play hockey. That was how I got hooked. Next thing you know, it's all I wanted to do. So,
Right.
sometimes that's just the bug bites you. And that was how it went for me. So, yeah, absolutely. I hope that whatever Ryan Smith game plans, and it's going to require a game plan with some community buy-in, but I agree there should be some focus on helping to reduce those costs. Well, how do you do that? Also buy more ice rinks, because when you have house leagues that can travel locally 20 minutes across town to play another house league, and it creates more of an environment. That's one of the unique things about playing travel hockey in Buffalo, is that we actually didn't travel a ton because of how many good teams there were in Western New York. Now, we would go Buffalo to Rochester, which is 60 miles, but the only time we really traveled big time was for tournaments. Then we would go to Canada and different states, different parts of the country. But I mean, until you really get into maybe a midget situation or a Bantam, where you're playing at a really high level, if you have 4 or 5 competing house programs around the area, you can play games against those other house programs, and that can very much engender the competition that will eventually elevate the level of the hockey being played. So,
Yeah.
again, more ice. But yeah, we got to figure out a way to make equipment cheaper. Goalie stuff, Robin, is eye-watering.
There is a joke I think is always made. I would always see a TikTok video or something about a parent coming in because their kid wants to try a goalie, and then the salesperson is like, did you take out your mortgage yet? Because that's how it is expensive. Goalie gear is just
It's
incredibly
insane.
expensive, and even player gear is already incredibly expensive. I spent almost $300 on skates alone, and that's for cheap skates.
I know. My next pair of skates will be my last pair of skates, I can tell you that. But even the cheap skates are still a couple $100. And the ones that are like fit to your foot or molded or stuff like that, 1,000 and up. It's crazy.
Not
So
gonna
just for
lie,
skates.
not gonna lie, Tom. I also have the issue that even though I'm a rec level player, I want to get a better stick, and I've been keeping my eye on those that do love the sport and already know, and maybe are like play the sport or wherever, know about these brands. But CCM Vision sticks, which is the one that Malcolm Celebrini has, I want one so bad, but they're $400.
Yeah, they're crazy. So wood sticks all the way.
Yeah.
So one of the last 4 NHL players to use a wood stick was what was his name? I'm trying to think of his first name. It was Stasny. Which one of the Stasny brothers was it? But I asked him one day, because he was in the Blues organization when I was there, and he said, or I asked him, I said, so why do you still, I think it was Paul Stastny. And I said, why do you still use a wood stick? I said, you're one of the last 4 guys. He looks at me and deadpan, this was his response: wood hurts more. So that's why he used a wood stick. So when he would chop somebody with it, they would feel it.
I mean, it makes sense because it is heavier and sturdier. These videos that are watching on YouTube, see I have 3 composite sticks behind me. They're light as hell because they're made out of carbon fiber. So you can whack it, but
and it'll fold in half, and you can just cry while you just see the dollar bills fly away out of the stick when it breaks.
That's why I got my cheap ones here. These are my cheap ones. These are $100 a piece.
Cheap. Yeah.
I know. See what we were saying. That's the point. They're still expensive.
I know. Yeah, it's not cheap. So
but the point is, we will see once more ice time becomes available. Maybe we'll see someone who will put actually an effort towards that. Maybe we'll see And if there are any leftover Arizonans listening to this show, maybe we'll see like a Utah's version of a Matt Shot. That person, Matt, because for the Utahns who don't know, Matt Shot was an individual who played an incredible role in growing the sport of hockey locally in the community in Arizona up until his passing from cancer.
Well, who knows? I mean, Robin, you've kind of boxed me into a corner on that one with that. Bail me out of that story.
Anyways, there we go. Archie.
Hey, Archie as a puppy. Hey, okay.
I know. I've seen pictures of Archie growing up.
Archie got big quick.
I know. Archie got big.
Yup. But you could tell if you look at the puppy pictures, even there, you can see how big those paws are. He's going to be a big boy. Right? So he's adorable. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up, Robin, unless you got anything else you want to add.
No, I feel like that covers it all.
All right. That sounds perfect. Well, we cover goaltender interference, the expansion of hockey in Utah, the wild card watch, and we always invite your comments, your thoughts, your questions. Hit us up. And Robin, where can they do that?
Yeah, they can find us just about everywhere. You can find your podcast up on, really everywhere, like YouTube, social media, even more important, on LO_NHL Utah, primarily on the app formerly known as Twitter, now for some reason called X. You can find me at Robin_Leaño over there. I'm also on Blue Sky at Robin Ice Time.
And I am at Tom Talks on Blue Sky. Always welcome the chatter over there and on Twitter at Callahan on Air. And that'll do it for this show. But again, tell your friends, subscribe if you haven't already. And we look forward to chatting with you on the next episode coming up here as Utah Hockey Club about to embark on a difficult but crucial 3-game road swing through Florida against the Lightning, the Panthers, wrapping it up with Chicago on a Sunday. We'll talk more about that on the next show. This has been the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast.